They say small towns are safe. That's what I believed, until the night my past came knocking. I've been living alone in this quiet town for a year. Everyone knew everyone, and the worst crime here was a teenager speeding on Main Street. 2 years before, I'd escaped a toxic relationship. Control, threats, gaslighting, the kind of relationship that made you question your own mind. I left, and I never looked back. That night, the storm outside was beautiful. Heavy rain hammered the windows, the kind that made you feel cocooned inside. I was in the kitchen, music playing, dinner on the stove. The scent of garlic filled the air. Then I heard it. A faint thud. I paused, listening. Maybe the wind? Then it came again, slow, deliberate, like a single knock. I turned off the music. Now there was only the pounding rain and my own heartbeat. Pulling the curtain just an inch, I peered outside. A man stood at the edge of my yard, hood up, rain streaming down his jacket, completely still. I couldn't see his face. Maybe he was lost, I told myself. A moment later, he turned and disappeared into the storm. I went back to the kitchen, but something in me was off. My phone buzzed with notifications as I stirred the pot. 10 minutes later, a different sound. A soft, dragging shuffle. Then, a click. The doorknob. Even though I knew it was locked, the sound made my skin crawl. Through the living room window, I saw him again, standing on my porch, slowly turning his head as though searching for a way in. He moved along the porch, then vanished from view. Panic hit. I ran to the kitchen window, and there he was, inches away. Even through the rain and fogged glass, I knew that face. My ex. His eyes locked on mine. He pressed his palm against the glass, then tugged at the window screen, gentle at first, then harder until it snapped free. My hands shook as I called the police. The dispatcher told me officers were on the way, 15 minutes. He stood there, staring at me through the rain. Then, without warning, he stepped away. Seconds later, the front door rattled violently as he pounded on it. Each slam shook the frame. I ran into the closet under the stairs, curling up in the dark. My breath was loud in my ears, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold my phone. The pounding stopped. Silence. I don't know how long I stayed frozen there. Then, sirens in the distance. Footsteps outside, retreating into the storm. The police found him 2 streets over, handcuffed, soaked, and smiling. That night, relief washed over me, but so did a truth I couldn't ignore. Small towns aren't always safe, and some storms bring back the people you thought you'd escaped forever.
Some people fear the dark because they can't see what's there. That night, I feared the dark because I could see exactly who was in it. It was midwinter, and I was working the late shift at the small market on the edge of town. By closing time, the store always fell into a strange kind of stillness. The shelves stood in neat, quiet rows. The only light came from the faint glow of the cash register screen. Outside, the rain came down in sheets, blurring the view of the empty road. Normally, even at this hour, a few cars would pass by. But not tonight. The street was completely deserted. A heaviness hung in the air, pressing down on me. Maybe it was the weather. Maybe it was just fatigue. But a part of me felt like something was off. I was gathering paperwork from the counter when it happened. Every light went out. The cash register went black, the refrigerators fell silent, and the street lights outside blinked into darkness all at once. For a moment, I thought my heart had stopped with them. It wasn't a flicker, like when a storm rattles the power lines. No, this was like someone had flipped a giant switch, killing the entire block. The rain was now the only sound. I grabbed my phone, turning on its dim flashlight, and started toward the storage room to check the fuse box. But then I heard it. From the front of the store, just beyond the glass doors, a faint sound. Not a bang, not a knock. It was breathing. I froze, phone light shaking in my hand. Slowly, I turned my head toward the windows. There he was. A man in a heavy coat, hood pulled up, rainwater dripping from the edges. His face was pale against the darkness, but his eyes glinted unnaturally when they caught the light. He leaned forward until his face was just inches from the glass. Then, in a voice so calm it made my skin crawl, he said, "It's freezing out here. Can I come in and warm up for a bit?" Something about that voice, it didn't match the storm or the darkness or the way he was standing perfectly still in the rain. I swallowed hard, keeping my tone polite but firm. "Sorry, we're closed." He didn't move. He didn't blink. Then his voice hardened. "Just a few minutes. Don't you understand how cold it is?" The shift in his tone sent a shiver through me. It wasn't a request anymore. It was a demand. I stepped back without realizing it, my instincts screaming. He tilted his head slowly, then stepped back into the darkness beyond the glass. But my gut told me he hadn't left. Trying to calm myself, I headed for the storage room again. I checked the fuse box, no problem there, which meant the outage was coming from somewhere outside. Planned. That thought barely formed before I heard it, the sharp crash of breaking glass. My breath hitched, my phone light shook as I slowly turned toward the sound. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate between the shelves. Something shifted in the shadows, a silhouette moving toward me. That was all I needed to see. I ran, my shoes slipping on the wet floor where the rain had blown in. My hands fumbled at the lock on the front door before finally wrenching it open. I bolted into the downpour, phone clutched tight, and called the police from the sidewalk. The minutes stretched into eternity as I stood in the storm, watching the dark interior of the store. When the officers arrived, they searched every aisle. In the back, crouched between two shelves, they found him. His hood had fallen back, revealing wet, stringy hair clinging to his face. He looked straight at me as they pulled him up, his voice soft and calm. "It's freezing out here. I just needed a place to shelter." Maybe that was true, but the way his eyes locked onto mine unblinking told me another story entirely. I think he'd been watching me long before the lights went out.
House sitting always sounds peaceful, until you realize you're alone in the middle of nowhere, and someone's knocking at midnight. When my friend asked me to watch his house for a few days, I thought it was perfect. A break from the city, time to breathe. The house sat on the edge of town, practically in the wilderness. At night, the only light came from a few lonely street lamps flickering in the distance. The first 2 days were bliss. Morning walks with my friend's dog, Max. Evenings on the porch, coffee in hand, listening to the sound of the forest. But on the third evening, the weather turned. The air grew heavy. The sky took on a sickly green hue. By midnight, the wind was tearing at the trees, the rain slamming the windows. I was half asleep on the couch when it happened. 3 sharp knocks. I froze. No one should be here.
Peeking through the curtain, I saw him, a man standing at the door, soaked to the bone, rain dripping from his hair. But it was the smile that made my skin crawl. It wasn't friendly. It was knowing. "I'm looking for my friend," he called over the rain. "It's urgent." I told him my friend was out of town. He nodded slowly and turned and walked into the storm. Relief washed over me, too soon. Minutes later, he was back, this time pacing slowly along the porch. His silhouette drifted in and out of view, sometimes disappearing entirely, only to reappear at another window. I turned off the lights, hoping he'd think no one was home, but Nax's low growl told me the man was still out there. Then I heard it. The back door creaking. The knob turning. Max exploded into barking, his teeth bared. The door opened. Cold air rushed in with the smell of wet earth. He stood in the doorway, rainwater pooling beneath his boots, eyes locked on mine. He stepped inside slowly, ignoring the dog completely. I ran upstairs, slamming the bedroom door and locking it. My fingers shook so badly I could barely dial the police. Below, I heard his footsteps, slow, deliberate. Then silence. Peeking through the upstairs window, I saw him walking away into the rain. When the police arrived, they found no trace of him, except for the lock on the back door. It hadn't been forced. It had been picked. My friend claimed he didn't know the man, but I didn't believe him. Somehow, I knew this wasn't the last time I'd see that smile.
The first day I moved in, the air felt damp, like the place had been holding its breath for years. The landlord, an older man named Mr. Carver, said it was because the basement didn't get much sunlight. He laughed it off, telling me to just keep the dehumidifier running. The apartment itself was cozy. One bedroom, a small kitchen, and a living room with brick walls. But there was a narrow hallway near the back, leading to a locked door I wasn't allowed to open. Mr. Carver claimed it led to storage. I didn't push. It was my third night there when I first heard it. Slow, deliberate footsteps coming from behind the locked door. At first, I thought it was just the house settling, but then I heard something else, a whisper. Not quite a voice, but the sound of lips brushing against wood. I froze in bed, straining to hear, then silence. I convinced myself it was my imagination. A week later, I was working on my laptop when I heard a faint scratching coming from the same door. It was rhythmic. Scrape, pause, scrape. I stood in the hallway, staring at the door, and I swear I felt something standing on the other side. My skin prickled. I backed away and locked myself in my bedroom. By the second week, a smell started seeping into the apartment. Metallic, earthy, and rotten all at once. It was strongest near the locked door. When I mentioned it to Mr. Carver, his smile tightened. "Old pipes," he said. But that night, I dreamed of a pale hand sliding through the crack under the door, reaching toward me. One rainy evening, the lights went out. My phone flashlight was the only thing keeping me from total darkness. That's when I heard it again. The footsteps, but closer this time. They moved from behind the locked door to the hallway, slow and dragging. I whispered to myself, "It's not real, it's not real." But the sound stopped right outside my bedroom. A voice, low and raspy, slipped through the crack under my door. "Let me
out. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then the doorknob rattled, gently at first, then harder. I grabbed my phone and called Mr. Carver, my hand shaking. No answer. The next morning, I confronted him. His smile never reached his eyes. "You shouldn't have heard that," he said quietly. Turns out, the storage room was part of the original house, a coal cellar that hadn't been opened in decades. The last tenant in the basement had vanished without a trace. Mr. Carver's voice dropped to a whisper. "Sometimes they knock to be let back in. Sometimes they knock to get out." That night, I decided I couldn't stay. I packed my bags, but before I could leave, the power cut again. The scratching started, but this time it wasn't from behind the locked door. It was from inside my bedroom wall. I moved out the next morning, but sometimes, when I'm alone in my new apartment, I swear I hear it again, that soft, dragging scratch coming from the walls, like something followed me. And I still have the key to that locked door. I don't remember packing it, but it's sitting in my nightstand.